Fantastic film. Did make me hungry, but I didn't get to have the lunch ahead of time, so no fair. But like a lot of the films we've seen, of course, it has a lot to do with family, and the protagonist, what's his name again?
Michael Salamano.
Michael. About his family, and then of course a lot of the traditions are about family in the Israeli cuisine, and the cooking. The thing that struck me throughout, you get the impossibility of defining it and the possibility of defining it. You set that up right away in the beginning. But I thought one of the most significant quotes for me was, as soon as you try to define something, you limit it. And that's true about talking about spirituality. It's true about talking about a lot of things. By defining it, you by definition limit it. But it was a great search engine that you had in Michael. And did that come, when you had the concept for this film, did that come right away, that you'll have a chef that will go looking for things, or how did that come about?
No, that took a while. As I said to my new best friends who had the brunch with me, tell them what they missed. Yeah, it was pretty great. I never considered going to Israel. I wasn't on a top 10 list. It wasn't on any list. We wanted to go to Paris. And I was dragged there on a food press trip, and I couldn't believe what I discovered. This amazing people, amazing cuisine. And I came back, and people laughed at me when I said I wanted to do this film, and I thought that was a great reason to do a film. And it was actually right here in this room, just before I went to film, that I had showed my Calder film, and Alexander Calder for American Masters, and somebody said, "What's your next project?" And I said, "Oh, I'm about to go to Israel, this great film." And half of you laughed, not in a good way. I don't use hosts in my films, but I felt that I needed somebody. And for me, being there was an epiphany. And for a while, I thought I'd find some young person, not necessarily Jewish, and I'd track their epiphany. And then I met Mike, who has arguably the best Israeli restaurant in America. And it's remarkable, and you should all go there in Philadelphia. And I realized instantly that I needed somebody like him, and he turned out to be better than I thought, who knows the history, knows the culture, knows all those foods, and can be with those people so easily, to make them feel comfortable. He's so funny, he's so self-deprecating, and he takes direction really well. And so no, it took a while to figure out that he was my guy.
And how did you find him? What, just by meeting him? You said, oh, you met him, and then you said, "This is my guy"?
A mutual friend said, if you want the best Israeli cuisine in America, you got to go to Philadelphia. And so Dorothy and I, my wife and I, went down there, and we had his food, and everybody's had good hummus. This was better. And then the salad team, the little salads came out. They were better. The food was just remarkable. And then he came and sat down with us, and after 10 minutes he got up, and I looked at Dorothy and I said, "That's my guy."
And he was game. He said, "Yeah, let's do this."
And he was game. Yeah, very much.
That's pretty incredible. And it was it, how far into it was it that you understood that the reason why he was cooking Israeli food was because of his brother?
That didn't come for a while. And when we were filming, I knew that had to be a part of the film, but I didn't want to overdo that. You know, it's a fine line of you know, you're taking advantage of. And so that's just one of the things that kept me up at night, of how to play that and incorporate that in just the right way. It doesn't, you know, editing is what makes a film. I've done this now, this is the 40th anniversary of creating Florentine films. Ken Burns and I were college roommates, and Buddy Squires is one of the top DPs in America. And so I can make a pretty good film now. I can do that. A great film, that's what keeps me up at night. And it's up to you to decide. I don't know. You know, I can just try and try and try. And so those are the kinds of things that as a filmmaker you deal with. You know, how much do you do that? How much do you not? The idea of every chef that I filmed said to me, "You cannot be my enemy when you're sitting at my table." I'm not so naive that I'm going to create food for peace. But I knew I had to get that in the film somewhere. How? How much? How little? You know, what kind of impact? Oh, you're just, you know, ooey. So
No,
there's a lot of ooey when you're making a film.
well, and I think that, again, just before we move on to that part, that I think that it was beautifully done, but it also had to do, I think it was important for him too, obviously, because that was a lot of the raison d'etre for the reason of his whole thing. So to do a film that's as personal as it is for him, and not to deal with that.
Yeah, he turned down every Top Chef, every cooking show, everything. He just was not interested in that kind of thing. So this gives him an additional voice. I mean, he wasn't so much of a star chef in 2013 when we shot this. Now he is. I mean, he's James Beard Award winner. The book that came out last year of his, Zahav, A World of Israeli Cooking, won the James Beard Award as Cookbook of the Year. It was the #1 book. So he doesn't need me to be a star, but I can help give him a voice. And you know, we've become very close friends since then.
And the element of family that's in that deeply personal effect of his brother's death on the way that he cooks, and then to circle back by the end of the film to the Sabbath, and to what that means to the family, and his family going there on the 10th anniversary. It all is of a piece, and that is in the editing and the storytelling. But to get to the other section of this that is so important is obviously the political, and the idea that you can't be my enemy if we're sitting down at the table together. And the way that it shifted when things were going well, and the peace process was looking better, and then everybody was eating each other's food, and then suddenly it became politicized again. And to see how that can happen, but right at the top of the film you talk about, or somebody talks about defining Israeli cuisine, it's about the complexity of things, and it's the complexity of things here, and the beauty of things here. And that is the tapestry that you kind of wove together in this through the food element, through the way in. I just thought that was all pretty incredible. And that's pretty much what I wanted to say. Is there something that you would want to say out of the experience of doing this? Like, you know, I get the journey of you visit there, you want to do something about it, and then you find him, and now having made it, what's that like for you?
Well, it's been amazing. We're in 90 film festivals around the world. Either it's been shown or booked into next year. So that's been remarkable. But, you know, filming, and I'd like to talk a little bit more about the conflict, because I knew I had to get that in there, but I didn't know how. And I didn't know what would come up. And you can't talk about anything in Israel without the conflict coming up very quickly. And in fact, Hussam Abbas, who you met, the Palestinian chef who Mike hugs at the end, when I first filmed him, the first main trip, I interviewed him in English, and his English is just not good enough to let him have the voice that I knew that I needed him or someone to have in the film. And as I went back a year and a half later when I edited the film in the last month of editing, and we always try to keep some shooting days as what we call pickup, shots that you didn't get, things that you really needed. And I always knew that I wanted to go back and interview Hussam again. And Ruthie Russo, who you meet right in the beginning of the film, she makes her grandmother's eggplant. She is a very good friend of his, and they do a Palestinian farmers market together. And so she interviewed him with me, sitting, literally, I was sitting here, she was sitting here, camera's sitting here, I'm doing that. And she and I had talked, and we talked about what he should, you know, what to ask him. And then they just had a conversation with occasionally me whispering behind in her ear. And he got to say all those things. And I think the film would have been completely different had we not done that. And that was just so important to me, you know. To go to some of the other aspect of that is the touch points you use for the talking heads for context. The authorities, the people that could talk about the history, and I don't remember all their names, but that not only the cookbook authors, but the cultural people, and those things that came in between the visits to the cooking. Yeah. How did you find all those guys?
How did you hook up?
A couple of years of, I mean, the only good part of having such trouble raising money is and taking so long to make the film is we had more research time. And I had an associate producer who started with me on a history of Chevrolet film as a PA, and I quickly promoted her to associate producer. She happens to be American Israeli. Her parents have a place here in East Hampton. And so I asked her to stay on, and then it looked like this was going to be a good film to make. And so her fluent Hebrew helped a lot. And, you know, the filmmakers in here will all know this. You make a spreadsheet a mile long of all the people you're considering and looking at, and some that I had met on the first trip and networked with them about who else to get, and reading Israeli newspapers both in English, and Karen Shaker, the co-producer, could read them in Hebrew, and finding those kind of people in the restaurants. And I have a very sad note. The conflict never stops. Rama's Kitchen, who is the wonderful woman at the beginning who talks about local and not serving fish, her restaurant was firebombed last week. More than half, I would say, the majority of her workers are Palestinian from the local village. And, you know, it was burned to the ground and part of her home burned, and I hope she opens it very soon. But it's really, really tough there. It's really, and at the same time, it's an amazing place. It is much safer in Israel than here. Maybe not as safe as Sag Harbor, but we don't, you know, they don't lead their news with all the murders that happened that day. And you've got a better chance of getting hit by a bus. We only hear the bad stuff here. And I mean, that's one of the reasons I didn't want to go, you know, because I didn't know anything about it. And you know, it's got a beach the length of the country. If you look on the map, you see that, but it's a gorgeous beach.
Yeah.
It's a beautiful place to go.
But at the same time, as safe as it may be, that one section in which the person was talking about how nobody thinks about the future. Everybody realizes that if you're going to do it today, because who knows what's coming on. Now,
that's good for all of us, I think.
That's great for everybody. And it has a tendency to not be fear-based necessarily, but to make each moment more vibrant. And that goes into the sense of enjoying the cooking as well as preparing the cooking, and borrowing from the different traditions, because why wait to borrow from the traditions? Because you may never get to it. So, no, but I think brilliantly put together, and historical aspects that I didn't know. I probably was told this at some point, but that Hebrew was a dead language before these.
That it was one of the poorest countries in the world.
Yeah, right.
is just amazing.
And I mean, there's a lot more to learn, but these just little tidbits that I picked up from this, and from the nature of being across the street from your neighbors, but never until things are going well, actually finding out what do you eat in your kitchen.
Right.
You know, for years living across the street. So and the sort of the polymorphous nature of the community is just fantastic. But I do want to give people a chance to ask questions. So
sure.
I don't know. There's not enough light for I can see. Somebody raise their hand? Yeah, right here.
Okay. But when I was in high school, I'm Protestant. The only girls that I used to date were Jewish, because invariably they invite me over to eat, and the mothers cooked them were so good I couldn't help myself. Besides, they were very nice.
Well, there you go.
He likes, to summarize, he likes Jewish cooking. and here's Mike's book, by the way, and it's available on your bookstore, everything. We're very lucky to have the producer of this book, who's also the executive producer of the film, who doubles as my wife, Dorothy Kalins, is here, and she does beautiful cookbooks like this.
Wonderful thing. Right up here.
All the rest of the female chefs, we couldn't get them all in the film. There just wasn't enough time. Oh yeah, there are plenty. It's harder to be a female chef in Israel than it is here. It's still a male culture, but there are plenty of female chefs there. Yeah, I mean, somebody else is going to say, why didn't you have this restaurant? Why didn't you do this? We have an hour and a half of fully cut scenes that didn't make it into the film. that will be extras on the DVD and other things. There's a lot of other amazing things that didn't, that we had to cut out eventually.
Well, it may be only the size of New Jersey, but there's a lot of restaurants.
There's a lot of restaurants. There are a lot of restaurants.
A lot of restaurants to deal with, right here.
My next project, I am doing a film called Becoming Jamie, and it's about a friend of 40 years who last week became a woman. And I filmed her transition surgery. And it's a very emotional and heartfelt story about what she's gone through that she didn't realize until last year that she was a woman. So it's pretty great. Thank you for asking.
Yeah, other one? I guess I can't see to the back.
There's somebody up there.
Okay.
Did I have any misconceptions about Israeli cuisine? I had misconceptions about everything. Every day was a surprise. Israeli cuisine was the least of my misconceptions. I arrived that first trip in Israel on Shabbat, and I was taken to a Shabbat lunch. There's actually one shot in the film from that Shabbat lunch. And, you know, how can something be good if it's cooked for 16 hours? There's no friggin' way. And it was fantastic. And then I was totally jet lagged, and I went to our hotel, and I'm about to take a nap, and I pull open the curtains, and there's a party going on in the beach. And I thought, wait a minute, everybody's religious in Israel. They're supposed to be at shul. Why are they here? And literally I said, well, I better grab my camera quickly because obviously they're all going to shul soon, and went to shoot on the beach. So, I mean, that kind of thing. And the misinformation. I saw a Travel Channel show that said every single Israeli is kosher and every single Israeli is Orthodox. Ain't happening. So, yeah.
The difference between Jerusalem and Tel Aviv was just like, that was just so phenomenal.
Yeah.
To see an entire town shut down.
Yeah.
And to say, I used to think of kosher as one thing, but then I saw it as oppression. Because in a lot of ways that does parallel oppression. Do we have anybody else?
Yeah, I did not want to make a travel show. I did not want to make just a food show. That's why I call it A Portrait of the Israeli People Told Through Food. So, thank you. Thank you.
And we did have
one more up there. Thank you, Nigel. Thank you. The name of the restaurant is Zahav. Zahav. That's it. And call well in advance and tell them I sent you. We should all go together. Actually, I'm very surprised that no one has asked this, because usually the first or second question is, so are you doing food tours? And the answer now is yes, because I started getting calls from travel companies. And I went, no, I don't want to organize the tour. No, I don't want to. That's not what I do. I'm a filmmaker. And then I realized, wait a minute. We have a food tour guide, a whole company that helped us set up the film. You met him twice. Avihai Sabar, you met in the Shabbat scene at the end. That's his family. And in the ancient Israeli wine press scene. And so we've just finished our second official In Search of Israeli Cuisine food tour in October. We did one in May. We have one trip sold out in January. There may be a second trip that they're putting together. We're opening another in May. And you get to meet the chefs and go to their restaurants. And if you want some biblical stuff, it's always 5 feet away. So there's that too. And so, yeah, you can join us. Or you can bring your own. You could just be a couple and use our offices, our services for that, or
That's fantastic.
Yeah,
fantastic stuff. So remember, please, to mark your ballots and turn them in on the way out. If you don't have them, get them.
Mark often.
And yeah,
Thank you all.
Vote early and often.